The Penrith region has been synonymous with the sport of rugby league since the Penrith Panthers entered the then New South Wales Rugby League in 1967. Their stranglehold on the region has been even more apparent since the Panthers' current domination of the NRL, winning the last 4 premierships and playing in the last 5 grand finals. But despite rugby league's dominance in the region for over half a century, there was a time when the Western Sydney Outpost had a team in the nation's top-level football competition. From 1984 to 1985, Penrith participated in the National Soccer League. It was a time of rapid expansion for the competition, but dwindling crowds and interest would ultimately lead to the club's demise by the end of the decade. This is the story of the rapid rise and demise of the Penrith City Soccer Club. Before we dive into this video, I just want to say thank you for all the love you've been showing our videos of late. I'd love if you could like the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. It really helps support us. You can also check us out on social media and our Discord, with all the details in the video description. Back to Penrith. In 1983, interest in the National Soccer League, now in its 7th season, was starting to dwindle. Crowds were dropping, not helped by the 1980s recession, which saw a worldwide drop in sporting attendances. All up, the 1983 season attracted just 637,373 fans across 240 games, for an average of just 2,656 per game. The highest attendance was a local derby between South Melbourne and Heidelberg United, with 16,000 on hand, but the lowest was a woeful 150 fans at a Brisbane Lions game on the penultimate round of the season. This wasn't helped by the cost of travel, when money and sponsorship was at a premium. The drop in crowds and rising costs saw state leagues threaten to create so-called super leagues, which would ultimately replace the national competition and see the country's top leagues to be based in Sydney and Melbourne. NSL officials had engaged the West Nally Marketing Organisation, which had a multi-million-dollar investment in Australian football, with the marketing organisation suggesting the expansion of the competition to 24 teams divided into 2 regional conferences. These conferences, which would introduce playoffs to determine the Australian champion for the first time, would keep the competition national while limiting travel costs. NSL officials ultimately voted in favour of West Nally's proposal, but in order to keep the states happy, the NSL executive made several concessions, including an arrangement for promotion and relegation. One club would be relegated automatically from each conference and replaced by the top club from either New South Wales or Victoria. If a New South Wales or Victorian club was not last in its conference, the merits or demerits of the lowest club from both or either states would be weighed up against those of the State League champions. By September 1983, Sydney Croatia, Militia Eagles and Blacktown City were all leading the race to snag 3 of the 4 spots available for the Sydney Conference. That left 1 spot up for grabs, and it was going down to the wire. Sutherland Sharks, Ku-ring-gai and Manly Warringah were all in the running. And while all those clubs were existing within the New South Wales State Leagues, another candidate soon emerged that didn't. Penrith City. Penrith City had been formed separately from State League 2nd Division club Penrith United for the purpose to seek NSL entry. It was a community drive that had been in the work for 3 years at the time. Club official John Glynn said, "Our case is based on the standing of the Penrith Nepean district as the major growth area of Sydney. I do not believe that any other area could challenge us in this respect." Where have I heard expansion clubs being chosen as growth areas over existing clubs? MacArthur, Western United. Oh, sorry about that. Something caught in my throat. But football in the Penrith area had already been booming for 2 decades. Since the foundation of the Nepean Football Association, then known as the Nepean Junior Soccer Association in 1961, the provisional boundaries of the new association would include Windsor, Richmond, Blacktown, Rooty Hill, St Mary's, Warwick-Gamba and Falconbridge. Today, those boundaries remain fairly intact except for Blacktown and Rooty Hill leaving to form the Blacktown and District Soccer Football Association in 1979. Today, the Nepean Football Association has more than 30 clubs spread out across the Penrith, Hawkesbury, Blue Mountains and Wollondilly local government areas. But back to Penrith City. Bidders remained optimistic that they had a chance. Cook Park at St Mary's was to be remodelled to accommodate the club, with Penrith Park, the home of the Panthers, to be used for marquee fixtures against teams like Marconi. The club was hopeful of recruiting Ian Hunter, a former Socceroo under-20s captain and the current Marconi star. But with Sydney and Croatia, Militia and Blacktown all but guaranteed a spot, Penrith would have to go up against Manly, who would use Cromer Park at DY, Ku-ring-gai, representing the North Shore and looking to use North Sydney Oval, and the Seymour Shore Park-based Sutherland Sharks. By November 1983, the new clubs were finally announced. There were no surprises when Sydney, Croatia, Militia and Blacktown were announced, but it was Penrith that had snagged the fourth and final Sydney spot. Penrith City official Denis Adrigan, a Hungarian immigrant who became a founder of the Australian Coaches Federation, said the club was extremely happy to be accepted. He said, "Our work for 3 years has been to set Penrith up as a genuine growth area." Adrigan targeted the aforementioned Hunter and Ken Bowden as key targets to recruit to the club. Sutherland didn't take Penrith's selection well, with coach John Watkiss saying the club was most unhappy, as it felt it should have been selected ahead of Penrith, Manly and Ku-ring-gai. Down in the Melbourne Conference, Melbourne Croatia, Green Gully, Sunshine, George Cross and Brunswick Juventus all joined, beating out the likes of Faulkner, Croydon City, Morwell Falcons and Northcote City. Ahead of Penrith's inaugural 1984 NSL campaign, the club from the foot of the mountains got its man when Ian Hunter was signed from Marconi. Hunter had played juniors with Penrith RSL and Penrith United, giving the locals an opportunity to cheer for a homegrown player. But the aforementioned Bowden didn't come over, having left Sydney City for New Boys Sydney, Croatia. Roy Cotton was probably Penrith's most notable recruit. The English stalwart had been a Tottenham Hotspur youth prospect before playing a handful of games for Brentford, Leyton Orient and Aldershot, before he landed down under with St George in 1979. After 3 years with St George, which included a loan spell with Sydney Olympic, Bowden spent 2 years with Wollongong Wolves, before signing with Penrith for the 1984 season. Penrith City would also adopt the colours and imagery of the Penrith Panthers, adopting the brown and white, the colours of the Panthers at the time. Backed by the Panthers Leagues club, Penrith City would be colloquially known as the Soccer Panthers. Penrith's first game in the NSL was on March 4, 1984, with Cook Park at St Mary's the host for the match against Newcastle Rosebud United. With just 1,500 fans on hand, the hosts succumbed to the visitors from the Hunter 2-0, with a goal each side of half-time. Ian Witherspoon was ultimately the first goal scorer for Penrith a week later against fellow newcomers Sydney, Croatia. A much bigger crowd of 3,514 was on hand at Cook Park, but the visitors took a 2-0 lead after 28 minutes. But a minute later, Witherspoon clawed one back for the hosts. Brian Jackson scored for Penrith 4 minutes before the break to make it 2-2, but Croatia had the lead on the 52nd mark, with Marijan Kovacic scoring to take the visitors out to a 3-2 lead. Star recruit Roy Cotton would ultimately level the scores at 3-3 a minute before full time, to earn Penrith its first point in the national competition. Penrith would struggle with consistency though. With only 2 wins in its last 11 games, the club ultimately missed the finals. It had won 8 of its 28 games, losing 10 and drawing 10. It fell 4 points short of a playoff spot. However, throughout the season, politics off the field saw Penrith lose its key backer in the Panthers Leagues club, after it opted to play at Cook Park at St Mary's instead of Penrith Park across the road from the Leagues club. Incredibly so, the club could make ends meet. The players had to directly sell their major sponsor, the Sydney Pink Pages, as part of a deal so they would get paid. Penrith's form in the NSL Cup was much better than their league form. Back then, the Cup featured a group stage and then knockouts. Penrith topped a group featuring Militia, Canberra and Sydney Olympic, earning a spot in the quarterfinals, but unfortunately lost its knockout match to IPL Leichhardt, missing out on a semi-final berth by 1 match. The following 1985 season got a whole lot worse for Penrith. Just 4 wins in 22 games saw the club slump to 11th in the Northern Conference, 2 points above Newcastle Rosebud United. In a normal world, Rosebud would be relegated, but luckily for them and unlucky for Penrith, Newcastle, Wollongong and Canberra had all been designated as development areas and were saved from relegation. It meant Penrith would be relegated to the state leagues instead. In the last home game against Newcastle, only 566 fans turned up to Cook Park, with the local Penrith Press newspaper lamenting, "Despite the importance of the game, the crowd was very poor, and one must wonder whether people of the district really want first-class soccer." Not looking to go down without a fight, Penrith was willing to take its issue to the courts, unless it was granted a league tribunal hearing. Penrith argued that the league should reverse the result of a 1-0 loss to Sydney Olympic in round 20 because Olympic striker Marshall Soper, who played in the game, should have been serving a suspension. Soper and Sydney City defender Jerry Gomez were suspended for 2 matches after a game between Olympic and City at Pratton Park. The game was abandoned when hundreds of spectators invaded the pitch, with the NSL imposing the 2-week suspensions on the 2 players. Ultimately, Penrith had no success. So after its relegation, City was taken over by a Uruguayan-backed group, which saw the club's name changed to, shock horror, Uruguayan Penrith. It survived in the state leagues without success until the end of the 1989 season, before it was ultimately wound up. A new Penrith-based team, Penrith Nepean United, emerged in the 1990s. After a brief spell under the name Penrith Panthers, United secured promotion into the top flight for the 2000 season, playing games at Penrith Stadium. United was ultimately relegated at the end of the 2000 season before returning in 2007, but by the end of the 2009 season, the club was wound up. In order to keep Penrith's representation in the state leagues, the Nepean Football Association formed its own team, the Nepean FC, as it looked to create a pathway for local footballers to play at a high level, with its first season in the state leagues in 2011. It remains there to this day, competing in the New South Wales League 2 competition as of 2025. Whilst more coincidence than design, the Western Sydney Wanderers began their Australian football journey on July 25, 2012 against Nepean at the ground Penrith City last played at, Cook Park at St Mary's. That concludes today's video. Thank you once again for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. If you haven't already, why not hit that subscribe button and like the video? It's completely free and helps grow the channel. We also have channel memberships. That's a way you can financially support us, but there's no pressure to do so. But any support will help grow the quality of our videos and will help us put out more video essays like this. We'll see you in the next video.